Well, hello, and welcome to this week's weekend fly tying stream. Caught me in the middle of doing something. Um, Actually, I was just laying down the underbody for today's fly. Sorry, just trying to adjust my microphone here. So we're tying a Popham. Again, it's one of those flies that I've tied before, but don't tie very often. Pophams are a little bit challenging in the material department just because they're so um, full of materials. I guess would be the way to put it. It has three body joints that are all veiled using Indian crow. So yeah, they can be a little bit of a challenge. I'm looking a little bit washed out here. So let me just. Nope, too far. So we're gonna tie a Popham, or at least the first part of a Popham. We're gonna lay down the underbody and then do probably most of the body, if not all of the body. I haven't decided. I know that sometimes when I work on bodies for the streams, the streams themselves can get pretty long. I don't, I don't want that. I don't want the streams to be too long. Um, but you know, first off, as always, if you enjoy what you see and want to check out more of my work, you can check out my Instagram at justwondering.brad. And if you want to support the channel or purchase any of the flies that you see me tie on the stream, you can go to my Etsy shop. It's Studio1213 on Etsy. So we'll bring the camera into the fly and get cracking. Yeah. And focus. So here I'm just laying down the underbody. If you watched any of my previous streams, at least the body work streams, you'll see me do this, half a dozen times. Nothing special here. Always just making sure that your thread is very flat when it goes on. It doesn't need to be perfectly flat. This is going to be a floss silk body. So if you know me, I don't mind having a little bit of texture in the silks, in the body silks, but you want that texture. If you are going to put texture in your silks, you want that texture to be regular. You don't want it to be kind of lumpy and random. You want it to be like nice, even texture. So it still pays to put down a very nice, even, flat underbody. It just doesn't need to be super perfect as long as your thread wraps are evenly spaced. And the other thing about tying with silk for silk bodies, the silks themselves can go on flat, and so you can, you know, that's just another level of flatness that you can achieve with silks if you so desire. You just got to make sure that there's no like huge, gaping canyons or mountains in your underbody, and you can do a lot with just flattening your silk. Never mind your actual underbody. Now for a 3-jointed fly, we're also going to reduce the number of turns of rib. So normally, if it were just one long bodied fly, I divide it up into 5 rib wraps, or 5 rib, turns. For a jointed body fly, I usually reduce that to um, 3 rib wraps per joint. And this is true whether it's three joints, as in a Popham, or 2 joints, as in last week's Jock Scott. I think odd number of rib wraps per joint is just the most aesthetically pleasing arrangement. Um, it's not the only one. I know some people do it differently, but I think the most common, and certainly the one you see people do, is 3 wraps per joint. Sometimes 4 if it's a 2 jointed fly. But again, I think odd numbers of rib wraps are aesthetically pleasing. Now this is a 5/0 Britannia hook from Ron Lucas. Um, really need to get more hooks. I've said this a couple times, but really do need to get more hooks. I'm down to my last 2 Ron Lucas hooks. I really like these hooks. They're kind of a nice, I won't say budget, because they're, for the price that you pay per hook, for Ron Lucas hooks, you could purchase, 6 Gaelic Supreme hooks, but you aren't going to get that very nice, super glossy finish on a Gaelic Supreme hook. And you're definitely not going to get the very nicely worked point and barb on a Gaelic Supreme. So I use Gaelic Supremes a lot. You'll see me tie on them quite a bit, but Ron Lucas hooks really are my kind of go-to hook. I just have not had the chance to sit down and order some. Okay. Now, 5/0 hook, you probably could do 4 layers. And when I say layer, I mean a fold down and back is 1 layer. So that's actually 2 layers. This is 3 layers, which is in reality 6. The kids of the complex are out saving the world, as kids ought to be doing, but unfortunately they chose to do so right outside my window. And this is not a terribly quiet complex to begin with. Like I've mentioned before, my upstairs neighbors have rather loud feet. Downstairs neighbor thinks he's Sting on a guitar, but he ain't. And one of the neighbors has a car whose emergency alarm goes off constantly. So just crossing my fingers it doesn't happen while I'm streaming. So we're just going to whip this off. And you don't have to pull it super tight. And in fact, for underbody material, 1, you don't have to pull it super tight. And 2, sometimes you don't want to, because pulling it tight can result in, basically when you whip finish something, and even with half hitching, you can build up extra bulk, just because you're wrapping thread wraps over the thread, and then you're pulling it tight, and that does scrunch up the thread in the area of the knot, and you don't necessarily want that. You just want enough so that it's not going to unravel. All right, so we're going to switch to our fine thread. Like I said, I think this is like Orvis brand 74 denier or whatever. It doesn't really matter too much as long as you're able to tie it flat. Now this has a strictly um, a flat silver tinsel tag. No tip. Excuse me while I crack open my preferred soft drink. Advertising free drinking. You know, if this company wanted to sponsor me, I'd be incredibly happy. But yeah, can you imagine a company like Coca-Cola sponsoring a classic Atlantic salmon uh, fly tires live stream and YouTube channel? Yeah, right. Um, that'd be cool. So anyway, this has a strictly a flat silver tinsel tag, so that this first layer of wraps is actually just purely to ensure that the underbody, the thread underbody, is perfectly flat. Um, this may be a little bit of just my opinion, but it is my opinion that it is more important to have a perfectly flat underbody under a tinsel body segment, whether it's the tag, whether it's a full body or the full body, as in like a silver doctor or a body joint. If you're going to do flat tinsel over any part of a body or for like a major segment of a body, having a super flat underbody underneath is way more important. And that's just because um, the because the tinsel is more rigid than the floss, and you can't tie. Tinsel already goes on flat, but you can't make it more flat or less flat depending on whether you need to fill in a bump or lump or valley or something. Because because of that, it is more important for the underbody to be flat underneath because the tinsel, excuse me, the tinsel will conform to the underbody far more rigidly than floss will. So it's way more important that the underbody then naturally be flat. So, and of course, always or I always wrap 2 layers of tinsel, so down and back. Um, and it uses a little bit more tinsel, sure, but it also ensures that if there are any gaps between the wraps and the first layer, they're more likely to be fully covered by the second layer. So that just reduces the chances of having you know large gaps, and it also helps kind of smooth out the body if it needs it. Like if your underbody wasn't 100% perfect. Okay. A little extra there. Trim the tag ends closely as we can. Just bind them down with a few extra wraps because tinsel. All right. I'm just doing this because there's a dark background. I can't quite see if it's as flat as I'd like it. So I just put my hand behind and it provides a lighter surface that I can see. That's just a function of having a camera behind my tying. So I'm going to wax my thread. I'm going to tie on the tail. Tail is just golden pheasant crest as normal. And as always, I'm just going to prepare it by trimming off some of the extra webby fibers. Let's figure out if that's a good length. Probably want a little shorter. That seems about right. Right, so as you can see, trim off the web, but I leave the stubble, and that stubble is really useful in helping lock down the tail. Just make sure it goes on straight as possible. Couple turns. Now I'm going to wrap the thread going towards the back of the hook to tie on the tail, and then I'm going to wrap the thread back towards the front to tie on the tail veiling and the herl for the butt simultaneously. I'm using lightly waxed thread. Now I've got a couple of turns in, so I'm just going to give the tail a little bit of a pull. That just pulls everything a little bit tighter. It pulls some of the loose stubble under the thread so that it locks in place. And just one more turn to lock it. That's not bad. All right, that's good. Trim this. Now I'm going to grab my veiling, which is Indian Crow, which of course I substitute with Red Weaver. Grab my herl because I'm going to need a lot of it today, or more than usual. All right, so I got my red weaver feather. Excuse me. I'm just gonna dab a little bit of saliva, and I'm gonna use that to slick the feather down. Um, so feather slick down. That just makes it a little bit easier to handle while tying it in. What are the kids doing? Tie it in flat. And we'll pick a hurl. Mm-hmm. A little bit more wax and thread, of course. Now, I will say, so this fly, the Popham, has a throat of Eurasian jay. And normally I wouldn't use Eurasian jay on such a large hook. Uh, Eurasian jay ties at max up to size 3/0. Um, so tying on a 5/0 hook with Eurasian jay is not my favorite thing to do. However, because this fly does not have body hackles, it just has the veilings. The the shortness of J won't be so noticeable. And if it really comes down to it, and I tie it on and it looks ugly, I always have blue dyed guinea that I can resort to. It is not my favorite substitution, just because there's so much more kind of variety and I guess variation, um, subtlety to the colors of Eurasian Jay than there is to any substitute that I've ever seen. So now we have to remember that there's three more, or there's two more butts after this one. So I don't actually want to make this butt as big as I normally make my butt. Um, doesn't quite have to be so thick. All right. Next is the first body joint, which is orange floss, and that is ribbed with oval gold tinsel. So I'm actually going to pull off enough oval gold tinsel for both body joints that demand it. And of course, this gets tied in towards the back of the hook. Now, what I am going to do is, because this has 3 joints, and I want to try and make sure that they at least come out somewhat even. Now that I have the first butt in, I'm actually going to make a mark just using a pen. Let's see, so I want to tie finish here. I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm not hugely concerned with making it exactly perfect. I don't have a marker. Yeah. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect. I'm not any kind of perfectionist by any means, but we're going to try and well, close enough. At least give us some kind of like guidelines to go off of. We'll mess those up pretty quickly here, but we'll ballpark it. There's some like design theory in which you shouldn't actually have all three joints be equal. You actually should have the joints get longer as they go towards the head. That's a little advanced for me, but if we can kind of. I think a lot of people's tendency is to do the exact opposite. However, they tend to make the first joint the longest, and that's just because when you're tying the fly, when you start the first joint, you have the most space for the first joint, or that's the way it appears. When in reality, it really ought to be the shortest if you're going to make them unequal. And that's just because as you go towards the front of the fly becomes more crowded. There's more going on. And so anything that you put on at the front of the fly that is going to be underneath everything else, so the body, for example, it needs to have a little bit more emphasis in that area if you want to be able to see it. So we're just going to thread trap that. Now that level of visual theory is a little bit beyond me, but I am not above cheating my body segments to be a little bit shorter on one end and a little bit longer on the other. It makes for a better looking fly. So yeah, so here you can see I'm laying on the floss very flat. Now this is JEC silk, not my first choice, as you probably all know. The French Lagarten silks, which are a little bit coarser, actually, are my first choice. But we have no choice in this today. I'm actually going to wax my thread because we're trying to tie in everything in a very small space, relatively speaking. I want as much, grip on these materials as possible. So I'm just going to give a little bit of wax, just give a little extra security. Do 3 turns of gold. spaced okay before tightening down on this. Couple of turns. Yeah, secure. Then the veilings for the body, we're just going to treat the same as we did for the tail veiling. A little bit of saliva just to slick down the fibers so they're a little bit more easily handled. Lay them out. I want them to extend just past the butt of the previous segment. And these feathers, because they are handed, are going to have a slight twist to them. So I am going to tie them in with a slight reverse twist or a compensatory twist. These feathers are a little bit rare and hard to come by, so I do not want to waste any of them. I want to be able to use all of them. Okay. Uh-oh. All right, so we're going to pick a hurl for the mid body joint. Or the second butt. Up to the front. This being a mid body joint. Don't want to go, again, don't want too many turns, so just going to unwrap one. All right. More gold tinsel. Find my thread here. Yeah. I'm experiencing a little bit of fraying of the underbody up front, but because I used a lot of wax in tying on my gut eye, that's not actually of concern to me because I can just press the underbody thread that's coming apart into that wax, and that will hold it. This is why using wax thread is really important and really useful. Um, I am not a huge fan of using a ton of super glue to hold together flies like this. I know some people do use So I've done a few experiments actually where I've taken flies and I've done ridiculously thick underbodies and tried to make ridiculously under or thick flies. Uh, and I have found that in order to get those ridiculously thick bodies with a reasonably small head, you actually have to use quite a bit of. I actually used UV set, uh, like the UV set, like head cement. That actually works really great for those kind of extra thick bodies. Um, Maybe we'll do that for a stream one of these days. I'll just come with a fly that's just a head or underbody and tail, and we'll do some experimenting with trying to get extra thick. Now I will say that in those experiments, I wasn't even able to get the fly as thick as I wanted it. Um, I think I could have gone a whole lot thicker. So we can do some freestyle experimenting with that. And one thread, just a little turn, secure that silk. And wax. One. Now I'm trying to match the angle of these rib wraps with the angle of the previous section's ribs. And that just gives it all kind of a uniform look. Way too much. What's extras? All right, so 2 more veilings. Again, just slicking them down a little bit helps keep them manageable while tying them on. Tie them on again, just a little bit longer than the butt. A little bit longer than that, even. And the one underneath. Ooh. Oh, nuts. Ooh, and that's why I put the trash can right under my feet. Sometimes you can catch things like that. Here we go. Just gonna put this. There we go. A little bit more wax in the thread, as usual. Got a big little bit of nests going on here. Really wants to unwind here. Well, like I said, use lots of wax. Just kind of press it into that wax. Works fine. Not concerned. Now for the last butt. Bind everything down here. Up forward. I mean, the thing about these multi-jointed flies, where the joints are all pretty much the same, you do the same thing three times in a row. One last turn here as well. Couple turns. Silver. I'm going to kill this spool of silver oval eatery supply. So it's just kind of binding everything down. With flat thread wraps. Now the floss itself can also assist in flattening things, but as I said, you want to do as much of that with your underbody and your underlying thread wraps as possible. I'm going to take it right up to there. And this is a light blue layer, ribbed with silver. So, I think, do I have light blue in here? I do. So, extra floss stored on just wrapped around a business card. Super handy. It's way more than I need, but that's all right. So I want to take this a little bit further forward. Okay, thread trap. And wrap. Okay. Sorry, I forgot I have this light on. There we go. Just doing some gel prep under the lamp. Forgot I had that on. Sorry about that. So this is actually pale blue Legarten. Not a whole lot of difference. It's just a little bit coarser, quite as fine as the JEC. Saving the world. I mean, or they could be burning it down. I don't know. Not entirely certain with the kids these days. So we're going to trim the excess. Wrap our rib. Oop. And again, I'm trying to match the angle of the ribs from the previous joints. Now, so that was actually a really handy trick for anybody tying, well, anything. If you need to hold, for example, like a bit of floss, or as I was doing there, tinsel, you can hold it with your right hand and you can manipulate your bobbin with your left. Being able to do that is a really good trick, or is a really convenient trick. Um, when tying anything, not just classic salmon flies. Again, body veiling. I'm going to pull a couple of. Fortunately, I can find 6 matching body veilings off this particular skin. This is one reason why I try not to tie Pophams too much. They are kind of material intensive, especially in the rare and unusual category. Even using substitutes, um, the nice substitutes are all fairly expensive themselves. So, do try to be a little bit careful with my subs, even. I just want to make sure these don't rotate too much. This bottom one's a little too long. Just slicking those fibers down just to make the feather a little bit more easily handled on the fly. And it also just helps the feather, the fly get. Sorry, it just helps the feather get tied in flat. So. All right. Okay. I'm just gonna wax our thread per the usual. Bind everything down. Okay. All right. There we go. All right. Just clean up these feathers so I don't lose them. And now we're going to tie in the throat. And that'll be the last thing we'll do today. Diving into the goodie bag of feathers. So Eurasian jay. This is the only jay you should be using. Please don't use North American jay. That will get you in all sorts of trouble. North American jay species is protected by U.S. law. Eurasian jay, on the other hand, from what I've heard, is considered an absolute pest. It is also the traditional jay species when it called for in classic Atlantic salmon flies. But besides that, it is considered a pest. And I have no qualms about using it. I do have to try and find a big feather. Like I said, 5/0 hook. But again, because there's no body hackle, I'm not too concerned about having to match the taper of the body hackle. I just kind of want the jay to actually be present. At least to come close to matching the presence of a 5/0 hook. Probably would have been better if I could have used like a long shanked 3/0 or something like that for this fly. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those, so we are using what we have, both in terms of hooks and materials. But we'll make it work. And like I said, it doesn't matter too much. It'll be fine. I mean, jay is one of those really strong materials that is incredibly recognizable, even with just a few turns. You don't need a whole lot of it to really for it to be present in a fly. But again, normally jay only ties up to size 3/0 on average. It's very rare to find jay, the barred jay feathers. The jay with this distinctive barring pattern up to a larger size. So we're gonna unwrap a couple wraps just to reduce some bulk. Backs that thread. Now you will see that I'm wrapping this J feather in the, quote, wrong direction. And that is correct. But I am wrapping it in the wrong direction because um, J only comes, there's only so many barred feathers on a J. And so you really want to be able to maximize your use of J from a wing. And so being able to wrap hackles both ways and utilize both the left hackles and the right hackles. Because the thing about the J that we use for hackle is these are actually the wing coverts. They're not like neck feathers or breast feathers where they're going to be mostly bilateral or bleh, being the same on the right and the left. J, you know the uh, the wing coverts will be handed. You'll have left hand and right hand wing coverts, so you want to be able to use both. So being able to wrap a few wraps here, and I'm going to tie the hackle down on the side of the shank because this is a rather thick rachis. Trim. I'm even going to go so far as to try and mash down the rachis just a little bit with some pliers, just for some added. Then I'm going to trim the rest of the snubblings and stubble. For binding, gonna pull everything back, slick it back, bind everything down with some tight wraps. Then I'm going to build up a little bit of bulk just to make sure that I can get the underwing in. And there we go. So that is the throat hackle. And going to wind to the front, and we're going to whip finish this and tie it off. Switch to black thread for the wings as usual. So there's that. So this is the body of the Popham. A little bit messy just because some of those body veilings had a little bit of a propeller twist to them, but that's all right. You can compensate for that by the way that you tie them in. But other than that, so I think we're going to call it a day there. Pretty good progress on the fly. We'll do our usual two-part thing where I do the body on first week, so this week, and then do the wing and everything else on the following week. Yeah, so thanks for hanging out this Sunday. As usual, if you enjoy what you see and want to see more of my work, you can check out the Instagram. Focus. You can check out the Instagram, justwondering.brad. And if you want to purchase any of the flies that you see me tie on stream, you can go see what I have in stock on my Etsy shop. It's Studio1213. And so it seems like this Sunday time is working out pretty well. It does look like 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or that's New York time for people who are not in the United States. Seems to be working out pretty well. So I guess we'll keep it. Yeah. So we'll hang out. There'll be a Sunday in February that I won't be able to stream, so I might stream on Thursday of that week. But other than that, I think Sunday will be it. So anyway, thanks for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed that. And if you want to be informed about when the next stream is going to go live, you can click subscribe. Also, I will begin filming some more in-depth how-to videos um, once my new computer comes in, which it's arriving tomorrow. So brand new computer, super high performance video capabilities. Um, we'll be playing around with that. There'll probably be a bit of a learning curve that will need to be taken into account in terms of timeline. So maybe not anything just yet, but subscribe so that you can see those videos when they do drop. And yeah, so thanks for hanging out, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care. Bye.